Colonel John Davis, 1755 to 1848. Colonel John Davis spent almost his entire life on Chestnut Tree Hill. He was born there and lived in the same house on the corner of Chestnut Tree Hill Road and Route 42. He was a young man when the Revolutionary War began, and while it is not known if he was a loyalist or a patriot, he was kidnapped by a regiment of British soldiers from New York, along with other young men who might enlist in the army. Apparently, the soldiers hoped to keep those potential American soldiers from fighting, and possibly to convert them to the British cause. John Davis was held prisoner for a period of time, but eventually escaped and came home. In 1782, he married Mehitable Thomas from New Haven, and the couple had 14 children, all born in the Davis homestead. When Oxford was deciding to break its ties with Derby and become independent, the then Captain John Davis, later Colonel, was part of a committee who induced people to clear the brambles from an area where a town green was planned. A letter that he wrote to his son in 1810, when he was 55, has come down to us, quoted in Litchfield's History of the Town of Oxford, Connecticut. He tells of getting up at 3 in the morning to ride to New Haven to meet with Colonel Humphrey, maybe David Humphreys. This was followed by a day of house building, after which he rode home again, coming in before 9 that night, saying he was refreshed with many other things too numerous to mention. Perhaps the liquor had flowed freely for the carpenters. Davis's rank comes not from war service, but from his enlistment in the Connecticut State Militia, 32nd Regiment Infantry. Davis grew sheep and cattle, particularly beef cattle, which were driven to New York. He also maintained a sawmill. At 90, he broke a colt and rode it to New Haven. In his 92nd summer, he mowed grass with a gang of men all morning. At 93, his house caught on fire, and he fought it bravely. Shortly after, he had a fall from a colt and died from the exertion of battling the fire and from his injuries. Litchfield writes, he was a man much respected in and about Oxford for his sterling qualities, both as a citizen and a neighbor.
Robert Limburner, Oxford blacksmith. Robert Limburner was born in Oxford on March 20th, 1821. Orphaned at the age of 9 years, he was placed in the care of a married sister, Mrs. John Worcester of Oxford. He remained in that house until he was 16 and attended the public schools of Oxford. He was sent out as an apprentice to a blacksmith in Washington, Connecticut. He spent 4 years as an apprentice and worked 3 years in that trade as a journeyman. He then became a machinist, working for 7 years in Washington. For a few years, he operated a foundry and machine shop under his own name, but later went into another business. He owned a wood turning company, which had a large business in the Washington area. He moved to Salford in 1863, where he made straw paper boards, and he was reportedly very successful at this business. In 1870, he sold his interests and retired from business, residing at Oxford Center. He became extremely active in community affairs, as well as church activities. He was a deacon of the Oxford Congregational Church, as well as Sunday school superintendent. In addition, he supported that parish liberally with his financial backing. He was elected the first selectman of Oxford 12 times and held many other offices. He served as a representative to the state legislature, being elected in Oxford to that post, after it had been held for 21 years by the opposition party. He was previously a representative in 1860 from the town of Washington, Connecticut. He was a member of the Republican Party, joining soon after the party was formed. He was married to Emmeline Williams of Washington. They had but one child, Josephine E., who married Samuel Buckingham. Robert Limburner died on September 3, 1905, and was buried in the Congregational Cemetery on Governor's Hill Road, Oxford.
Shelton Smith, 1817 to 1872. Born about 1817, Shelton Smith lived his entire life at his parents' home near the intersection of Hogsback Road and Route 67. He started his life as a joiner or cabinet maker, but later switched to farming. He was also a member of the militia and a constable. In 1841, he married Caroline Sherman of Woodbury, and the couple had 3 children. What makes Shelton Smith extraordinary is that he kept a diary between 1840 and 1841. His writing was intended to be his transactions of everyday life, but in spite of creative spelling and almost no punctuation, it is much more than that. His intelligent, hardworking, friendly, unsophisticated, inquisitive personality shines through. Smith's work as a cabinet maker included making tops, table or furniture tops perhaps, of curly maple, barrels, guns, and a painted wagon complete with scrolls for himself, which he finishes just in time to carry home his bride. The house where he lived had a forge, and he mentions mending wagon hubs for neighbors and making a wagon tongue. He made frequent trips to New Haven, where he solicited and filled orders and bought supplies. Some wood came from a local sawmill. When Smith begins his diary in 1840, he's in trouble with the local militia and waiting for a judgment. He doesn't say what he did, but the fine is $5 plus $75 in what we would call court costs. He doesn't comment on how he feels about such a heavy penalty or how he is going to pay it given the economic conditions of the day. He is interested in local politics, goes to lectures, and rhapsodizes over a painting of Jesus on display at the Congregational Church. Smith had a special friend, Lucretia, who was engaged to marry a man from Vermont. He goes to visit her frequently, brings her mail from the post office, and even drives her to New Haven to get a bonnet for her wedding. On that trip, they call at the elegant, to Smith anyway, home of Lucretia's friends who serve them tea. Smith is completely awed by the furniture and the food. They even fed my horse, he marvels. When the couple marries, Smith is one of the 10 people there to witness the ceremony. When he begins to visit and court Caroline Sherman of Woodbury, Smith describes the Masonic temple on the hill in Woodbury, and the young men playing ball on the green in glowing terms. He says nothing of his feelings for Caroline, and the only hint of the upcoming marriage is that he buys cloth in New Haven for a new coat and has it cut and sewn by a local tailor. He drives through terrible weather to Woodbury for the ceremony. The newlyweds stay until the next day and then head back to Oxford with the comment that the sun was shining, it was very warm and pleasant. The final 4 lines of the diary are written twice as large as any of the other script. Shelton Smith, Caroline Smith, State of Connecticut, in the year of our Lord, 1841, April 14th. Shelton Smith, 18